Let's talk about those. Some of these rookies breaking down again their redraft value strictly for 2024. Winners, neutral, and losers at the quarterback position. We'll start with winners, and you have to highlight Caleb Williams at the top. First overall pick, as he should be. All the hype, the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. Would have been an immediate win regardless of what the Bears did the rest of the draft. But then, just given because you had DJ Moore and Keenan Allen already there, then they go and pick 9 and select Rome Odunze, making this, in my opinion, the best trio of wide receivers in the NFL right from the jump. If Rome is as good as everybody, including myself, believes that he is. They also get some tackle help in round 3, a really sturdy guy out of Yale there. To me, Caleb Williams comes away as the single biggest quarterback winner, walking into a situation that you very rarely see this just beautiful for the number 1 overall pick. I don't see how, if he's as good as everyone thinks he is, that he could fail in this type of landing spot. Immediately, my QB 12 in redraft. I love the spot for him. What do you think about Caleb Williams landing with the Bears?
Yeah, I think it's a storyline that's going to be talked about for the coming weeks, months. I don't think we've ever seen a number 1 pick land in a situation like this. I mean, personally, I look back to Joe Burrow in the last couple of years landing with my Bengals, but he was there with just T. Higgins and some dust. But now we see Caleb Williams landing in a spot with 3 legitimate, very high-end wide receivers. DJ Moore, a guy that people have liked for years, finally came out of his shell last year. Keenan Allen, established veteran who's been a target hog and just an all-around producer for years in Los Angeles, coming over to Chicago now. And yeah, like you said, Rome Odunze, he was the all greened out reception perception profile from Matt Harmon. A lot of people really excited about this guy. And it's hard not to. We saw the production in Washington last year. There's nothing not to like about the situation that Caleb Williams is walking into. And unless he is just a generational bust, like you said, I think he's set up to succeed. And I think your price of quarterback 12 is pretty fair. I think that's right around where most people are going to have him. And I don't see any qualms with that. And but the other guy that I'm arguably more excited about in terms of their situation and landing spot, you can go back and forth all day, but I love the spot that J.J. McCarthy landed in. He got arguably, I don't think many people would come back at you with this, that it's Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the NFL. There's some debate to be had, but in my opinion, he's firmly the best receiver in the NFL. You've got Jordan Addison, a dynamic, emerging young guy. He showed flashes in his first year, especially as a deep threat. Grabbed a couple of bombs from Kirk Cousins, and then T.J. Hawkinson. Don't think he's going to be ready for week 1, but he's going to be available for the majority of the season. And then you've got the offensive scheme in Minnesota that's setting up J.J. McCarthy for success. Kevin O'Connell, he's over the last year, especially last year, he made something out of nothing more than once. He did it with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs. Both, and he wasn't afraid to let the rock fly with both those guys. He just understands that this offense flows through Justin Jefferson regardless of who's at quarterback. Last year, we saw both Mullins and Josh Dobbs attempt 35 passes in games with Justin Jefferson reaping the most rewards from those attempts. And we saw Nick Mullins crack 350 yards twice. And I believe both those games were against the Lions secondary. We've talked a little bit about them being and they added on, the Lions secondary added on in this draft, but we've talked about them being an attackable secondary, especially last year, but that's beside the point. I want to say the same thing about J.J. McCarthy that I do for Caleb Williams. It just, unless he is a generational bust of a prospect and everyone is overvaluing his traits as a quarterback, there's just not really a way for this guy to fail. He's got a coach who's not afraid to sling the rock, an offensive scheme that's propped up multiple significantly worse quarterbacks, and he's got some of the best weapons in the NFL. I see Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy kind of on the same plane in terms of how the situation that they're entering in. I think Caleb Williams will go much further ahead of J.J. McCarthy in fantasy drafts, as he should. But in terms of the situation and how they're set up to succeed, I think these are both smash landing spots. What do you think about McCarthy, though?
Yeah, I actually have J.J. I have J.J. McCarthy as my QB 23 right now. That's 7 spots above the ECR in terms of best ball drafting right now. So I absolutely agree. A complete smash, an A+ landing spot here for him. And now, next up on the list, another winner, in my opinion, not quite to the level of Caleb Williams or JJ McCarthy. Again, those were A+ in terms of weapons scheme, but Jayden Daniels also landing in a really, really good spot. Now, I want to make sure that I preface this too. Just because I gave an A+ to McCarthy's landing spot and I give Jayden Daniels a B+ or so, I still would rather have Jayden Daniels in fantasy. In fact, he's my quarterback 13, just behind Caleb Williams, another 5 spots above the ECR there, because I really do like this landing spot, just not quite as good as the others. Still, though, McLaurin, Dotson, they add Ben Sinnott, who we're going to talk about later, an athletic freak at tight end. Austin Eckler, a generational pass-catching back, if he can regain some of that explosiveness we've seen over the years. And then you talked about play calling as a big factor. Kingsbury had some very solid offenses over there in Arizona. Kyler was consistently hovering around that QB7 or so range in average for those 4 seasons. Quarterback 15, quarterback 6, quarterback 5, and quarterback 10 was 20 or more fantasy points per game in 3 of those 4 seasons as well, and had at least 418 rush yards. That's what I really get excited about, was that Kyler Murray loved to take it off. They kind of open the offense up, so then it opens up. If there's nobody open downfield, there's huge rushing gaps. And Jayden Daniels is 10 times the rusher that Kyler Murray is. As fast as Murray is, Daniels is like a legit running back at times with that ball in his hand. So I am stoked to see. I mean, the fact that Kyler Murray had an 819 rush yard, 11 rushing touchdown season at his tiny, minuscule size gets me jazzed up for the way Jayden Daniels could be used. So good weapons, good scheme with a lot of designed rush attempts as well. I don't see much to not like here. The only kind of, when you have a defensive head coach in terms of, who's the guy? Freaking Quinn, Dan Quinn, the head coach there. It's just sometimes they like to pound the rock, and they do have 2 really good running backs. And I could see them protecting Daniels a little bit in that early part of the year. But still, I think he's going to run the ball a ton, and he's got great weapons to throw it to. So this was a winning of a landing spot, in my opinion. He could have ended up falling to the Patriots, and we're going to talk about them in a second with Drake Maye. I like this spot for Jayden Daniels a lot, though.
I think it's a great spot. I mean, just as long as they allow him to do what he does with the ball in his hands in the open field as a rusher, I think from a fantasy perspective, he's gonna produce almost no matter what. We talked about it a little bit last offseason, but guys like Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts have all been relevant fantasy quarterbacks with very little passing production, just relying on their legs to produce in fantasy. And Jayden Daniels, obviously the best, most dynamic rushing quarterback out of this draft class. Not the best landing spot in Washington, but like you said, it's not, that's not to mean that he's a lower, we're ranking him lower than JJ McCarthy. I still think Jayden Daniels is an arm and a leg ahead of JJ McCarthy in terms of what he can do as a fantasy producer. So I really like Jayden Daniels from a rushing perspective to produce. And if they allow him, and I understand the fact that they might want to protect him. I mean, we saw some of those clips of him just getting absolutely lit up last year at LSU. And he's no Josh Allen, like battering ram build. He's the quick, elusive, kind of a little skinnier in terms of his frame. So there's some reason to believe that they're going to want to prioritize his health and safety and not let him run completely buck wild. But he has the skills to produce and be a dominant rusher. And as long as he does that, I'm not really even concerned about the passing production. He's going to be a top 15, I don't know about top 15, top 18 fantasy quarterback, as long as he's able to do what he does on the ground. And with the weapons that we talked about around him, the Terry McLaurin, I mean, the opinions are mixed on Jahan Dotson. I still haven't fully given up hope on Jahan Dotson, but the weapons are there. They're not completely dust, like we've seen in some other spots for some rookie quarterbacks. So as long as he can produce on the ground, and then we have some pluses from some solid passing production games out of Jayden Daniels, I think he's going to be an all-around fine fantasy quarterback and will be relevant in single quarterback leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only a handful more quarterbacks that are really relevant. Spencer Rattler going so late that we're not going to dive into him, but all the big 6 going in round 1, we did want to quickly touch upon. And I do consider Bo Nix, again, not quite as good of a landing spot as the others, but Sean Payton's offense has been prolific in the past when Drew Brees was at his best. I mean, he was breaking fantasy year in and year out. And then you even look in his most recent history when he had dusty quarterback Sean Payton. Drew Brees was age 39 to 41, was still averaging 19.8 fantasy points per game. Russell Wilson, he had 18 points per game. Trevor Siemian was 18 points per game. Even Teddy Bridgewater was right around 17 points per game. So even if you just gave him 18 points per game, that's right around quarterback 15 there in terms of yearly production for Bo Nix, landing in a perfect spot, in my opinion, for his skill set. We know Sean Payton loves that kind of point guard style distributor, and that's what Bo Nix, one of the most accurate quarterbacks, maybe the most accurate quarterback of this class, threw 45 touchdowns and under 4 interceptions, under 7 sacks, really takes care of the rock and just gets it out and lets his guys do their thing. I think it's a great mesh of quarterback talent and what Sean Payton wants to do in his scheme. They clearly love the guy. They go up there and pick him at 12, and a lot of people thought he might be more of a round 2 pick. So between the draft capital, the skill set, and scheme meshing, the weapons might leave a little bit to be desired, but we'll talk about Troy Franklin a little bit later. Fell all the way to round 4. His main college weapon. I love seeing when a college quarterback links up with his main weapon too. I still think Marvin Mims has a lot of untapped potential. And I've already talked about how I really do like Cortland Sutton more than the most sane humans typically do. So I don't think the weapons cabinet is all that bad either. I like this spot for Bo Nix, and there really weren't going to be too many spots I liked him, but a lot of people mocked this one up, and it ended up working out. So I consider him a winner and someone that I might take a stab at in the last type of rounds of my best ball draft, given the history of Sean Payton and his quarterbacks.
Yeah, and we all see what we're getting here. I mean, this just absolutely screams Sean Payton walking into the Broncos war room and just laying it all out on the table, saying, we're taking Bo Nix whether you like it or not. And he went and got his guy. I mean, there's no denying the collegiate production of Bo Nix. I mean, both at Auburn and more so at Oregon, he was one of the best just in terms of raw production numbers. He was up there with the better quarterbacks in the nation. So, yeah, you have to be excited about it. I mean, obviously, this is a reach. Most people had a mid-round grade on Bo Nix. So, but Sean Payton going out and getting his guy, and he's going to have a chance to compete and be a starting quarterback, and that competition is Zach Wilson. So, I mean, if he's in a legitimate competition with Zach Wilson come August, I think that raises a lot of red flags, but
he won't be. I'm not worried. There's no way.
Yeah. We'll see the training camp reports. I mean, obviously, like there's going to be like the coach speak stuff. Like, yeah, this is anyone's job. Someone's going to have to go out there and earn it. But I'm expecting Bo Nix to be the starting quarterback for the Broncos. I'm not particularly threatened. I don't think anyone is threatened by Zach Wilson. So he's got the opportunity to go out and get a starting NFL job from day one as a rookie. So there's nothing not to like about that. He's in line to get reps as a rookie. So, I mean, that's all I really have to say on the matter. I mean, I'm not thrilled with Bo Nix as a prospect or the weapons around him, but when it's a starting quarterback in the NFL, sometimes that you got to be happy about that.
And speaking of starting quarterbacks, I'll maybe let you take this one because I don't want my Patriots bias to take over. They land Drake Maye. I'm pumped about it as a Pats fan. We needed a new, fresh, exciting start, and they get a dynamic guy with a cannon arm. I was hoping for Jayden Daniels to fall, but ultimately I've accepted that it's Drake Maye, and I like what they did around him between Jalen Polk in early round 2. Love the Javon Baker. We're going to talk about those guys once we hit receivers next. I really like the additions around him. They did bring in some offensive line help as well. It was just refreshing to see the overall draft philosophy, even if I didn't love the picks at the line position they made. Just they really went and attacked their needs. They didn't focus on defense when they already have such a strong defense as they typically have done in the past. So I like what they did in this draft. It's hard to consider anything more than a C landing spot, in my opinion, just because we don't know what these weapons are. We don't know how the line will ultimately mesh, but they did at least give him some support, so I can't give it an F grade or anything of that nature either. So this is my kind of preface to Drake Maye. Should I be excited as a Pats fan, and are you excited at all? I know in our earlier drafts, we had been drafting Drake Maye a bit in hopes of a Vikings or something of that nature. Now these with the Pats, are you a little bit grossed out, or what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar range as you. The talent of Drake Maye is balanced out by the landing spot. Like, I've always liked Drake Maye as a prospect. I mean, I believe Josh Downs had over 1,000 receiving yards with him just 2 years ago at North Carolina. And then last year, that offense was on life support. And he had a connection with Devontae Walker, who is a late round guy that a lot of people have liked throughout the pre-draft process. But yeah, like you said, it's really nice to see that they are understanding that they need to, when they bring in a rookie quarterback with this high of draft capital, that they need to put weapons around him to make things work early on. Because in today's NFL, where we see team, especially like the fans calling for it, but like even in teams that are actually doing it, they're moving on from their their top 10 pick within like the first 3 years of them being on the roster. So you need to make things work pretty quickly with your rookie quarterback, especially when you're spending a top 3 quarterback. So them going out and getting 2 guys in the mid rounds of the drafts, I think that's just, like you said, a really positive thing from a team outlook and strategy perspective. For, seeing the Patriots operate like that. And I like both these guys. I mean, Jalen Polk, I enjoyed what I saw from him at Washington last year. I think Javon Baker is one of those guys that the fantasy community has been excited about, but I don't think too many people are familiar with his game out of UCF, just not having that many eyes on him. But drafted in the early 4th round, I think he was the 5th pick of the 4th round, but that's kind of beside the point. Early 4th round draft capital, and with the players that are currently in the New England wide receiver room, I think he's got a chance to come in and earn targets immediately. Like I've been praying for the day where I don't have to consider Pop Douglas as a legitimate receiver in an NFL receiving room, and I think we're finally here for that day that we're not going to see these just complete dustball guys running out there for receiver or at receiver for New England. So I think a new page, a new chapter has been turned in the book of the New England Patriots. We're in that awkward post Tom Brady era. And now we're obviously well into the Drake Maye era, and I've always liked him as a prospect. And you can't say that they've given him the best tools to succeed, but they are certainly trying. And I think the balance between Maye as a prospect and what he's been given in New England, I think the neutral C grade is just right about where everyone's going to have him. And I don't think there's any reason to be too bullish or too bearish one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And at minimum, Javon Baker does not lack for confidence. I don't know if you saw his post-draft presser, but talking when they asked, what are the expectations of what can New England fans expect of you? And he said, I can make people stand out of their wheelchairs or something. I don't get the exact quote, but something absurd of that nature. And I love it. I mean, the guy is pumped. He's ready to be here. They've already talked about Polk and Baker getting together, working out with Drake Maye throughout the offseason to get that early chemistry. And sometimes that's all you need. And all those guys do flash some talent. As Krona does say here, and great comment. Anybody got questions, get them on in here. He likes JJ more than Drake Maye. And honestly, in fantasy, I would agree. I have JJ actually ranked now higher than Drake Maye. That has flipped since the pre-draft, given, as we talked about, that A-plus landing spot for McCarthy. But Drake May's not too far behind for me, clocking in at quarterback 25, just a couple spots below there in the same tier as JJ McCarthy, because I think he has those better tools there in terms of everything. And now we got our last quarterback that we just have to quickly bring up. I don't want to spend a lot of time because I'm getting itchy to draft here. And Michael Penix, I don't think there's much to say. He's likely, if anything's working out for the Falcons, not seeing the field at all this year. So I had to give this an F in terms of a landing spot. I was very intrigued. A lot of people talk about how Penix had the best arm talent in this class, and I doubt we're going to get to see it flashed at all this year. Next year, who knows, maybe in the 3 years, we'll see Michael Penix. But in terms of 2024 redraft value, you can't touch the guy at all in drafts, right?
I mean, yeah, it's just all around brutal. I mean, we don't have to get too far into this, but yeah, he's not going to be relevant unless like there's a significant setback for Kirk Cousins or like just it's a complete mess to open the season or something. I don't even think if it's like bad, they're going to move away from Cousins. But yeah, this is a total mess. They said they were like trying to follow the Green Bay method or whatever you want to call it. And it's not the Green Bay method. You're spending a top 10, like Jordan Love drafted in the 20s. As I don't know how old he was when he was drafted. He was 21 years old probably. But now you're drafting a guy who's in his mid-20s with the 8th overall pick, who's had 2 massive knee surgeries. Like, it's not the Green Bay method. You're not taking a raw prospect and trying to develop him for a couple of years. You're taking a guy who's halfway to his AARP card with multiple ACL reconstructions, and you're using the 8th overall pick on him. Like, I don't know what they're thinking here. Everyone who's an NFL fan has heard the spiel that I'm giving right now before. So we don't need to get into too far into it, but it's a disaster and not on the fantasy radar this year.
What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.